kick this off, we'll go through a little housekeeping here. Welcome to the No Fluff webinar series. So today, talking about a thing that maybe we don't want to go through all the time, audits, our annual audit process, but so important to lay the foundation every year, so we can go through those audits smoothly, close in time, go into tax season, all that good stuff. So I've got Thomas and Kevin joining us today. They'll give intros here in a second, but we're going to talk audit-ready financial reporting and then an overview of Maxio and how that can help you out in the process. And again, if we haven't met yet, Ben Murray, SaaS CFO by trade, now a fractional CFO, coach, instructor, have my blog academy. So welcome everybody. And there's also my email if you ever want to reach out to me, ben@SaaSCFO.com. So a little bit of housekeeping today. We have the message box here, so let us know where you're calling in from. And then there's a Q&A box. So as we go through this, please enter questions. We want to take as many questions and comments as possible. So enter your questions there, and we'll watch those as we go along and take questions throughout. And then open it up for Q&A at the end. And as a thanks for joining, because I know everybody's time's valuable. Hey, Sophie in Berlin, V Gates. So downloads, I'll have my 40 plus SaaS metrics template bundle that you can download at the end of this today as a thank you for joining. So we're going to transition here, but I want to run a quick poll and learn a little bit about your role. I'm guessing this is going to be a heavy finance and accounting audience today, but if you could take a second, go into the chat box and tell me what's your role. Is it finance/accounting, CEO, founder, service provider, other? And guys, I'm guessing today it's going to be heavy finance and accounting with the topic today. So right now. So take a moment, go into the chat box. Let us know what your role is. Yeah, we've got mostly finance, accounting, plus service providers. So yeah, let us know so we can tailor the presentation to you today. So guys, with that, I'm going to stop sharing. I'll keep watching the poll and transition over to you guys.
Yeah, totally. Let me share my screen. You guys, let me know if you can hear me and see my screen appropriately.
Yep, definitely hear you good. Yep, Scott, controller, James, accounting specialist, Tom, CFO. Hey, Tom. Tracy, interim CFO at a Series A hardware/SaaS business.
Nice.
I'm curious, Tracy, is hardware part of the subscription or is it a one-time sale? Just curious. If you let me know in the chat. But all right, guys. Well, thanks. Here, let me check the poll real quick. So yeah, heavy finance and accounting, of course, with the topic today and service providers. So appreciate that, guys, today. So yeah, with that, Thomas, Kevin, hand it over to you guys.
Yeah, let's jump into it. So Thomas and I were on the sales side of things, so I know everybody's probably rolling their eyes from the finance side as we jump in. I think audit readiness might be something that's a bit underappreciated on the sales side. We often kind of talk about it like it's maybe the most important playoff game or even the Super Bowl for a finance team. There's many reasons to need to do an audit, and it's really to show that your company's financials are reliable and that we can assess the risk of the business. Maybe you're going for selling the business or it's just your annual audit, but it is crucial to the business, and you guys are the superstars that get us through it, even if we don't realize that we got through it. So it's really important, and today we're going to talk about why is it so important and how can a subscription management tool maybe like Maxio help you with audit readiness. So I'll kind of move over to the next slide, and I'll introduce myself a little bit, and then I'll kind of kick it over to Thomas just to introduce himself. Believe it or not, we our families grew up together in the South Shore of Massachusetts. I've been following Thomas everywhere, especially here to Georgia. But we've both been at Maxio for a long time. I manage one of the sales teams at Maxio. We talk to CFOs, controllers, accountants all day, every day. And the audit readiness is got to be one of the most important topics that we talk about. So, Thomas, feel free to.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. Thomas Bouchard. I do manage our solutions engineering team. So we're the guys that really show and demonstrate how the Maxio product works. And obviously, like Kevin alluded to, much of that, especially when dealing with the kind of CFO, finance, accounting persona, works around revenue recognition, billing, and obviously all the great financial reporting that we provide. So happy to show you that here in a few minutes.
Yep. And from a 30,000 foot view, we handle bookings, billings, revenue recognition, and ARR and MRR metrics. But for today, we're really going to zero in on audit readiness, revenue recognition, and all that it takes to get through an audit with flying colors, hopefully. So hopefully you can see my slide here. We've kind of coined this idea of a scale-up bottleneck and the fragmented order-to-cash process. So we sell to pre-revenue companies that are literally just launching their business, all the way to $100-200 million companies that have a solidified motion and a complex business model, oftentimes straddling both product-led and sales-led growth. Audits come up along the entire spectrum, believe it or not, even early companies that want to prove the reliability of their business before they start to talk to funding partners or just in general to start that process. But your order to cash process gets complicated very quick. Oftentimes the sales team wants to sell new products. They want to expand into new areas. They want the contracts to get pretty complicated. And oftentimes it gets over to the CFO's desk and they're like, you're selling what? How? Rules get instituted. And you start to really understand that like the way that we operate our business factors into how ready we might be for an audit and all the nuances that go into selling those deals and booking those deals and managing what happens after you sell the deal really does affect how you can get through an audit. And we talk to companies that are spreadsheet heavy. So maybe they don't have a subscription management tool. They may have a CRM. They often always have a general ledger like a QuickBooks, a Xero, an Intact, a NetSuite. But in the middle are spreadsheets with VLOOKUPs or index matches, which I'm sure you guys are all familiar with, that calculate deferred revenue, calculate unbilled accrued revenue, and take all these data points around the start and end date of a term for a subscription business. They may even have hardware, like we saw in the chat, which is always makes things even more fun. So these scale up inflection points really provide new challenges as you get bigger. And heavy dependence on Excel is usually where things start. So, you get into that audit, you're asked for some test pools of data from your auditors. They may even be in the office with you. And they ask for data and you go, I have to go find that. I have to go find the contract and the invoice and the rev rec schedule and the deferred revenue schedule. And maybe you uncover something, some error, or some problem that you actually didn't know was there until you started looking. Maxio really helps you lock down that information and be comfortable that the way you're invoicing, your revenue recognition schedules, they're all tied together and they all align with the same start and end dates that are being used. So we want to instill confidence in our auditors and our funding partners, and we want that audit to be hopefully low stress, although that may not be possible, as quick as possible, and as easy as possible to provide the data that they need. Thomas is going to go into the nuances of like what that means and how that looks. But I'm sure everybody on this call is familiar with changes on the revenue side of things, making the downstream effects of finance complicated. New products, maybe you're getting into multi-currency. And then for some companies that we talk to, closing the books never ends. So they're closing the books in the last week of the month only to start the process up again, which I've never done it, but go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I was going to say, now I'd love to hear from everyone. What's your target close date? Because I always shot for 5 business day close, was my target, and maybe day 4, kind of 5%. Kim says day 5. So I'm curious what everyone thinks, kind of best in class. Randall 10, Andy 6. Because that, right, for those who close the books, that's near and dear to our heart. If we can make an efficient process, Lisa says 5, perfect. It just makes our life so much easier. Then we roll into the FP&A process. And Kevin, what you said about sales signs a contract, sends it off to the accounting, and you're like, I don't know how to invoice this. It's like this, these bundles didn't exist before, so that finance sales connection is so important. Bob says 5, Rose says day 7. Yeah. So yeah. So it's so important. Just makes our life so much easier. And we know controller CFOs, last thing we want is a failed audit, especially if we're reporting to private equity investors. Like, definitely does not look good on us. So so important to have this. And I find, guys, through every audit cycle, it improves my accounting process. You learn a little bit something, you improve, so you can get through that next audit with flying colors.
Totally. Yep. And I'll just give you an example. I talked to a company recently. The sales team decided, okay, we're going to start selling usage. Only problem was the development team wasn't really automating the usage or giving it to the finance team in a timely manner. So they're getting the usage midway through the month and they have to put it in the previous month. All of a sudden, the close process is kind of nightmarish. So just an example, but there's many of them you might run across.
Yeah, maybe at the end we can talk a little usage and closing the books and all that stuff if we have time. That's an interesting topic. But yeah, obviously, this near and dear to my heart. So yeah, appreciate all the comments here, guys.
Yep. Yeah, and feel free to add some questions in the chat as well. So yeah, and a large majority of our customer base and the prospects we talk to, they're funded businesses, and a lot of them are trying to exit. Like that's the game they're in. And so reliability is, it's everything in a lot of ways. They need to prove that the metrics that they're presenting and that they're showing can be backed up in a way where they get that stamp of approval. So that's all we talk to every day are typically funded businesses looking to exit or get bought in some way, maybe IPO. So yeah, and before we get to the demo, I just want to highlight some of the Maxio ecosystem. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but we typically sit between your accounting system and your CRM. So the way that we typically talk about it is that, you close your deals in your CRM. We can often push data back to the CRM, like the invoices, the payment status of the invoices, MRR and ARR. And then we push the invoices down into QuickBooks as well, or into whatever your GL is. But we are that sub ledger to the GL. We provide the revenue schedules, the month-end close journal entries, unbilled accrued revenue, deferred revenue, and we really provide that sort of like super powered, Ferrari, for lack of a better word, for the CFO, who is often given minimal tools while the revenue team is given all the tools. So hopefully this makes sense. We also connect with payment processors, and we have our own payment processor. And we can even connect to your application as well, and more on the usage side of things.
Yeah, that's key. And guys, let's take a question here from Azam. Is Maxio just billing management or also like quote to cash?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I guess where I started was bookings, billings, RevRec, and MRR and ARR. That's kind of the core functionality. But we do have the option of using offer sign-up pages to be able to reach out to a customer and gather payment. And we also have some exciting stuff in the works where we'll be able to provide more of a maybe CPQ or quoting functionality. But the roadmap is ever evolving.
Yeah, and and Tom's, because Tom asked ditto Azam's question. We have CPQ and Salesforce. Is this duplicative? At least in my opinion, right? CPQ, right? You start the progression from quote to the order to the opportunity, you close it. Now it pushes over to the accounting side, which CPQ doesn't do.
Right. Yeah. In fact, this is Tom's question is a great segue into the demonstration. But before I share my screen, I'll say the CPQ definitely goes hand in hand with SaaS Optics, with Maxio. And so what that looks like is you use the CPQ to get all the appropriate products, line items, opportunity products on that opportunity. And then as soon as that's closed won, we pull the information down, and finance and accounting basically approves that information to convert into the finance record. So that's what I'm going to show you actually really briefly to start. And then we'll get into obviously the finance reportings. But that's a great question, Tom. It kind of kicks things off great here.
Yeah, good kickoff. And Tom, I use CPQ and Salesforce, so we had that whole process, and then we pushed it over to the accounting side. Now I was a different system integrated on the Force platform, so it kind of all flowed. But that was kind of my utopia. Was quote to cash.
Yep, absolutely. Just making sure you guys can see my screen. Okay, I think everything looks good so far.
Yep. Yeah, I see conceptual building blocks.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So basically, to Tom's point, and to anyone else kind of curious on quote, we typically consider our process from this perspective to be kind of quote to cash, but really it's really like quote to insights. And so ultimately what happens is if you're using CPQ, that basically just makes it easier to get the information into an opportunity. We'll pull that opportunity in, create the appropriate records, and then we'll create a revenue schedule and an invoice schedule. So we're going to walk through that now and just do a quick you might be asking, well, why are we talking about this process if we want to really talk about, getting ready for an audit? They go hand in hand because you really want to know how to trust the data, right? Is kind of how I think about it. So we're going to talk about that first. So basically what I have here is just a really simple opportunity in Salesforce with one recurring product, one non-recurring product. Just to save a couple seconds, I sync that into Maxio here. So we have a brand new customer, and I'm going to go ahead and process this order. Now, typically this takes about maybe 2 minutes at the most to do. I'm going to fly through it pretty quickly. Obviously, if there's any questions, let us know. But the idea here is all the information that's in my CRM is going to get pulled in, the address, the email address that we want to send the invoice to. I'm going to create that customer record. I'm going to create this contract. A contract is really just a shell, right? Most of you are familiar with GAAP or IFRS compliant revenue reporting. Having a contract allows us to have many to one contracts to customers, which we need to be able to report on to be compliant for ASC 606 and all that kind of stuff. So just going to create this contract real quick. And basically those two products that I had in Salesforce, just going to collapse this just to make it a little simpler to see, are right here. So I have what I sold over what period of time for how much. And you can see here, it's setting me up for kind of an annual term in this particular example. It's also generating some billings for me. So I have a semi-annual setup for my annual subscription. It's also giving me a full revenue recognition schedule, which we can go really specific to obviously daily revenue recognition, which you can see a good preview here of before we even submit this order. And then we're also, again, like I said, generating the invoicing, which we can easily pivot on if we need to. So just a couple of notes on the operational side, right? By submitting this order here, it's going to create the revenue schedule, create the invoice schedule, also generate metrics. And so kind of in a click of a button, we're going to have everything kind of set up for us here. In this particular annual example, now we're good to go. And every month we're going to draw down on that deferred revenue and bring that over to income, right? So we have all the information that we need. We see the two products that we've booked. In this simple example, we have our two invoices. We have our full revenue schedule. I know I'm going through this quickly, but I want to kind of dig into the reportings just to kind of give us a base layer of understanding of what happens, whether we are kind of sales-led or we have some type of like a product-led or even usage. Regardless, we are converting those effectively billings or contract information, subscription information into these financial records, right? We are creating revenue schedules, we're creating invoice schedules, and a bunch of other things, but we'll focus more so on kind of the finance and accounting side today, of course. All right. And then one thing we'll come back to in a moment is we also have this ability with a free Dropbox integration to plug in the contract, because I know this is one of the things that can be sometimes difficult in an audit in those random samplings, is to be able to easily show the actual contract related to the financial records that you have in system. So we'll circle back to that in a moment when we talk about a little bit more of the operational aspect of getting ready for an audit. Just give a little pause here in case there's any.
Yeah, if any questions, let us know. Yeah, I like that. And then I'm curious, can you click on those blue links? Does that take you back to Salesforce?
Yes, it does. So basically, if I were to do that, it's just going to bring me, like if I click on this ID here, it's going to bring me back to the account in Salesforce, for instance, which we just have a really simple layout here. But the idea is we are, and we actually push all the information back up into Salesforce, which we haven't done a sync yet because we just processed the order. But the idea here is that we can show all those financials, basically all of these objects as reportable in Salesforce. So you can actually send the data back up and use it for whatever you need to there as well to enrich that whole Salesforce environment. And also to show like your sales reps, like if an invoice was sent and if it was paid and important stuff like that, that kind of connects your teams together, provides insights.
Yeah, that's nice, because I was like, as we're doing our accounting stuff, invoicing, checking all that stuff, and it's like you're always referring back to that. I feel like that initial opportunity, the customer record, all that stuff, just to make sure everything looks good.
Exactly. So I went through that kind of order to, well, we haven't talked about cash collection, but kind of that order to cash, just generally speaking, of processing a sales order and getting ourselves set up. And so this is basically our home base. We're looking at this customer. Obviously, if we have multiple contracts, we can drill and we can see the specific contracts, right? It gives us a really good glimpse of what's happening from a bookings, revenue, and billings perspective, also open balance. So we have, obviously an invoice that we need to collect on there. So it's a really good view of what's happening. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill into some reporting for just this individual customer, and then we'll zoom out and show what an aggregate reporting view might look like.
And I may just address just a couple questions. So you guys are asking great questions, and I think a lot of them come down to like, what's the responsibility of each part, like each tech stack within the system? One of the questions was like, if a change to address, for example, is needed at that point in Maxio, does this push back to Salesforce? I would just say one of the things that we typically see is that Salesforce is really where you make the change to the address, which we call like account metadata. And that would sync back down into Maxio. You could have it go the other way, but that's the most common process flow that we see. And just one other point is just for Maxio, we really are the single source of truth for your start and end dates, which dictate your billing schedule and your deferred revenue schedule. And so that's kind of the magic there as well.
Yeah, that is a great question. And those are the types of things that really kind of make a big difference when you think about keeping all your data in line and having a source of truth. So that's exactly right. The only thing I would add is like if it's if it's the customer name, or if it's an email address, or if it's some type of other metadata, as soon as that's updated, we can pull that down so that it's updated for future billings or whatever. But one of the things that is also interesting here, and this could make a difference in your GAAP revenue reporting, IFRS revenue reporting, or especially your SaaS metrics. We're not going to be focusing on that much today, but the idea here is anything that you have in Salesforce as a custom field, whether it be a geographical or industry or whatever is like helpful or specific to your company to track, we can pull all those down in as well. So as soon as there's an update made, we can pull that in. We also have a free under the covers Clearbit integration that's going to pull in, that's going to scrape basically and use its intelligent data gathering to pull in a bunch of other stuff that you don't have to maintain, that you can also leverage in all types of reporting. So lots of good like firmographic and demographic information that really helps to kind of contextualize your data as well.
And two things, Randall. Well, one thing, firmographics. Then Randall had a follow-up question, but I do fractional CFO services for SaaS companies, and all the time we are talking about customer metadata firmographics. Yeah. When we're doing cohort analysis, retention analysis comes up so often, and we need that source. Right. Sometimes it's the CRM, sometimes maybe it could be Maxio of where. How do you slice and dice your customer base? Like, and that's got to live somewhere. It's going to be important at some point. Right. So I'm glad you mentioned that metadata. And I don't know if you have any comments on that, but then Randall had a very sensitive question to a CFO is like, what if the start dates, change?
Yeah. And I might add there, like there's different flavors of this. So when you're talking about like a contract modification, like somebody going from a 1 year to a 2 year agreement, let's say, sometimes that's a new opportunity in Salesforce that we would sync down, or you could change it in Maxio. But then there's also more project-based billing. So like we're not going to start the agreement until you go live, let's say. Mm-hmm. And in that case, we actually have a project module where you actually don't have to put in a date until you have a date. And that can even be managed in Salesforce in a lot of cases. So it just depends on like what dates we're talking about. And Thomas knows that deeply.
Yeah, exactly. So the only other color I'd add to Randall's question, or to Kevin's answer to Randall's question was, yes, so maybe it is more like a milestone based contract in the first place. But if it's something like, oh, we put in the wrong date, or there was something that was shifted, or maybe it was like an upsell, downsell, or an extension, There's lots of real life scenario, a reversal or an early termination. Like those are all the real life scenarios that come up in the context of managing contracts. And so not going to go super deep into this, but just want to give you a sense for that we do have this contract change functionality, which basically allows you to allows Maxio to do the heavy lifting. You just say what you want the change to be. So do I need to change the product or the dates or the amounts? And then Maxio will determine, well, what needs to happen for your revenue schedule? Is there a closed period? Obviously, we'll obey that, adjusting the metrics, adjusting the billings, reversing things out, credit memos, right? There's a lot of little nuanced things that happen. And so we do the heavy lifting for you on those types of scenarios. Some of them are simple, some of them can be complex, but we're giving you the ability to handle that really easily. And it's especially important when you have a connected general ledger and a CRM, because now everything is that much more informed, you could say, on what's happening on your customer and contract levels. So
totally. And there's a couple more things. Just one, we will honor close dates.
Yeah.
So you're making any changes in the past, we can lock that period and catch the revenue up. And then there was also a mention to our advanced billing module too in the chat, which is an awesome tool for more of your product-led growth, or maybe you're using our API to bring usage in. And so kind of a whole different conversation, but an important part of date modification too.
Yep. So. Yep, exactly. Great. Well, let's keep moving on here. Love the questions, and as you'll see, we'll continue to adjust those so you kind of get some live feedback here. Okay, so kind of shifting gears a little bit more into the audit readiness and finance reports. What I'm going to do here, just to kind of set the tone for what this looks like. Obviously, if you're new to Maxio, you kind of want to understand, all right, so we just saw some operational pieces, right? We didn't show you what's sending an invoice or what the invoice looks like, but rest assured we handle all of that stuff as well. But this is really the kind of downstream effect of setting things up and getting things plugged into Maxio from a reporting perspective. So I'm here on this customer record. I'm going to go ahead and click on Advanced Revenue Summary. And this is going to give us a really good breakdown of what we just booked, right? It's and this can be used to kind of confirm or understand or drill into the detail around an individual customer like we're doing here, or what you'll see in a minute, which is going to be more of an aggregate level report. Okay, so you can see here we have our semi-annual invoicing with that implementation fee kind of front loaded here. We have our full revenue recognition schedule, again, with the implementation kind of front loaded in the first month. And then we have our deferred revenue schedule, of course, which goes out into the future. Now, this particular contract didn't have any unbilled accruals. We'll see an example in the data on that here momentarily. But the idea is just, the reason I'm showing this is just to show you this is kind of what happens when we build out a contract. Obviously, this is just an annual example of an annual contract with semi-annual invoicing. But what it's going to give us, of course, is the journal entries. And again, simple example here, but ultimately with a bunch of data, what's great about this kind of what we call like a month-end close report is what customers commonly refer to it as, is we give you the credits and debits necessary to be able to move, for instance, that deferred revenue into your income accounts, your revenue accounts. So just a quick bird's eye view, like typically like new Maxio customers are jumping in here and just understanding how everything translated to, does this make sense, and just understanding how they can trust the data. So now I think what I'll do is I'm going to zoom out a bit and we're going to look at an aggregate level report of this. So I'm just going to switch tabs here. And this is, again, the same exact report type, but I'm looking at it for all of my data, okay? So again, you see this one's just named month-end close report. I'm looking at the last 12 months, and I've included in here just by default the billings or the invoices for the period, the revenue recognition schedule, the deferred revenue schedule, and any unbilled accruals. Obviously, we have some examples of this in our data, just not in the example from earlier. And so what's really great about this, especially in the context of preparing for an audit and have all that information available, is that these can actually be drilled into. And so for anyone that, by the way, that is using spreadsheets to do RevRec and deferred revenue, prepare to have your mind blown a little bit, because this can be shocking in a good way. And all I did was I just clicked these earlier just so you didn't have to see it render for a couple seconds. But the idea with these, and this is just our rev rec for that entire period, and basically what it gave us is revenue by month, by customer, contract, item, and the GL account, right? So this is my full rev rec schedule by customer, contract, and item for the entire period that's discussed here. Can you change the time frames? Yes, you can. Can you customize this and filter this? Can you include different detail? Yes, you can. This is just kind of the standard out of the box example, but it's giving us all that rich information kind of prints out, and it's basically like a spreadsheet format. And you can even, once you save these, you can export them. And I'll just please excuse all the scrolling, but the idea here is it also is going to give me the totals per month as well. So if I need that information, which of course can be really important. Now, one thing before I go, so sorry, my apologies. One thing that I want to point out is that, we talked earlier about, well, how can I trust that this data is accurate? And that's why we kind of walk through the order processing, so you can understand how everything is set up. But what's really great about this, and one of the things that Kevin and I this gets us really jazzed, is that at any particular point, really in a lot of the reports or any of the screens that we show, you can easily jump into a particular, let's say, contract. Like, I'm just going to click into one randomly here and show you, here's all of the relevant contract line items or transactions, the invoices, so effectively an invoice schedule, and then the full revenue schedule. I can see I have a closed period in place. So I go from kind of an aggregate level report down to really specific information. I can actually even go further. So I can say, all right, like one of these product lines here, one of these line items, I really want to dig into that a little bit more and understand what's happening there. No problem. I can actually go further and go down to the smallest level of detail, which is a transaction or contract line item, and see what's happening there. So as far as inspectability and audit friendliness goes, this is about as good as it gets, I would say, in my humble opinion, because you can really, with 2 clicks or maybe 3, get down to the point where you can see like really granular level information for the specific revenue by month for a specific product on that contract. All right, and then what I would say here is just, sorry for all the clicking, but trying to help contextualize. Same thing for deferred revenue. So if I click on this, this is going to give me a full, same idea, right, as revenue, is a full deferred revenue printout or schedule there. So I can see deferred revenue by month, by customer, by contract. Yeah, again,
definitely needed for audit.
Definitely needed for an audit, exactly. And while I think there's a couple more things I want to show, just to, and we can't show every single report type, but obviously we could do the same thing for the billings. In fact, let me just do that now. Why not? Let's click on this. It's now looking for all of the billings for this entire period for all of our customers. So again, it's going to take a couple of seconds to load. But I wanted to show what it looks like. This is obviously like thousands of contracts. It's just a demo environment, but really within, what was that, 5 seconds, we now have like a full inspectable, audit friendly, basically view, or you could export this to a spreadsheet to be able to give that really granular level of detail.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, especially for audit, closing the books each month, and then all the MR schedules that you can run by contract, by product ID. I was always running my MR schedule, RevRec schedule by product ID at that granular level, because my CTO always wanted to see what features were we actually monetizing.
Yes.
So yeah, good data.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that is even new to some of them or more recent Maxio customers is now that we have basically any data that you have at the customer, contract, or transaction level. So if you're thinking Salesforce, it's like account, opportunity, product, or line item level. If you have any type of custom fields on any of those, we can now add those into these types of reports to contextualize. You could also filter on them, but just adding them in as detail can sometimes be exactly what's needed to be able to show, like RevRec by, I don't know, sales rep. Like you have the ability to do that if you ever needed to.
Yeah.
So there's lots of flexibility when it comes to putting your data in context of whatever attribute or variable that is important to you.
Yep. Nice.
Okay, and then so I guess one more report I'll show, and then I'll just cap off on some like random sampling type situations that are more operational. But let me just show this one last report type. This is, again, a lot of numbers here, but I know that you guys like that kind of stuff, being kind of in the CFO finance persona, right? Controllers and accountants and all that kind of stuff. But this is a great one. Again, we kind of showed what it would look like to get that full printout for whatever period you want. This is the same idea. You can do it by period, but it's going to give you a bunch of totals. So I can see the total by customer, by contract for a lot of categories. And then also balances and to date information as well, right? So what are my invoices to date for that customer contract, for instance? Any future invoices, right? So I'm not going to list all these. You can see them, but it's giving us a lot of really rich information that we might need to be able to understand what's happening for all of those particular categories that, of course, are going to be important in an audit. So we're typically recommending this amongst a couple of others that are going to give us lots of that information. And again, like we can go ahead and export this to CSV or Google Sheets. Of course, that's typically needed to maybe do some type of a manipulation there, or some formulas potentially. But if I scroll down here, you can see, again, we're giving totals for all of those categories as well. So again, there's a lot of data here, but just to kind of show you, if I run this for all my customers, I can see all of those, that data by column, and it's providing a lot of rich information that is going to be important for auditors to be able to have and see. And then I figured what we could talk about next, unless there's any questions here in the meantime, is what it might look like to kind of answer those random samplings and show particular contracts in some of the access that you might consider providing to an auditor, even within Maxio itself. So,
And Thomas, quick question from Rose. What is advanced revenue management?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. So we're not necessarily going to get into great detail on that, but basically what advanced revenue management is what you might find with other softwares, or it's generally the idea of allowing you to do more complex revenue treatments. So if you do carve-outs or reallocations, or if you sell a single product that's bundled, but you need to do carve-outs to reallocate towards certain recurring or non-recurring line items, it's basically allowing us to do some complex revenue treatment that is kind of getting in. That's why we call it advanced, because it's you typically have like a 606 policy that maybe you've worked with an outside party, or you've come up with one on your own, and you're basically following that to the T and making sure that everything that you do is appropriate from like a compliance perspective. But we basically help you automate that. So we'll help you do SSP lists and apply those on the specific products for the specific types of formulas and calculations you need to represent that revenue appropriately. So I don't know if you'd add anything to that, Kevin, but that's generally the idea, like a good flyby on our advanced revenue.
Yeah, the two most common scenarios that I see within sales conversations are the very common, we discount our implementation to 0, but you actually need to allocate revenue towards it. So sales team thinks they're doing something smart, but finance team has to clean it up. And then the other one would be, we have some product that isn't a line item on the invoice, but we want to allocate revenue to it. So a lot of it has to do with a mismatch between how an invoice looks and how the revenue treatment is done.
Exactly. So I succumbed to the temptation just to give you a quick view of this on what might be like a pretty simple scenario, but this is where you maybe have kind of a reallocation where you're reallocating some of the revenue towards professional services in this case. So you sell your subscription item, but then you're carving that out to be to be represented as 20% of it being recognized for the non-recurring professional service fees. So just one little example, and we, with this type of an SSP list we're set up, it makes it really easy to apply that and handle all that automatically so that you don't have to do things in any type of a manual fashion. So again, simple example, but pretty common actually, right? To be able to do carve outs and reallocations and things like that. So.
And you don't typically need it for multi-country invoicing.
Correct.
So we do offer the ability to invoice in many different currencies and to consolidate some of that reporting.
Great questions today, guys. This is awesome. We want to make sure you're getting out of it what you need. So this has been great. So I think maybe what I'll do is just round out on an example here of, let's just take a customer example. So I understand, again, my being, in software and in sales, I don't deal with this personally, as Kevin alluded to before. We haven't done a financial audit ourselves, but what we understand is that it's very common, and actually I think expected, that there will be random samplings to where you have to basically show, here's this customer and contract and all the relevant details for it specifically, so it can be inspected and that they can kind of sign off on the legitimacy of those. So what we often find, and you might not expect this, but what a lot of our customers do is they'll actually provide a read-only, or what we call a report-only user to their audit firm. And what that allows them to do is actually go around and look at data. Obviously, they can't change or edit anything or delete anything, but it allows them to easily go and inspect those contracts that are under review. And so what that might look like is having access to like this screen where I can understand what's happening with the products that have been sold, the invoice schedule, the revenue schedule, all the reporting that we talked about, right? But then there's one of the things that I think can be really helpful that from what I understand can be a bit of a drag, is that they want to be able to see these financial records in context with the actual contract that was signed. And so we have this free Dropbox integration, and the idea is now once I process the order, or whatever, the customer signs up and whatever the case may be, we've done some type of a business interaction, we've done a billing, we now have all these records, and so we can attach as many files as we want here to this Dropbox integration, and it's available here. You just basically upload it, and the idea is I can click into that and see that, and there's actually even a way to where you could give them a full access to all the contracts if they need to be able to inspect anything there, kind of on a PDF basis. So again, just can be really valuable. A simple thing, but valuable to have access to that when you're looking in the Maxio system, like considering it as your subledger for all of your financials, to be able to see those signed PDF contracts as well can really be a value add, or so we hear. So that's a really kind of important detail. And again, providing access to your auditors as well can be invaluable and save a tremendous amount of time for having to go back and forth. And not everyone does that, right? That's going to be a level of comfortability, and the auditors need to be comfortable with it as well. But it is a great option that can really speed things up and provide ultimate transparency to your auditors.
Perfect.
So that's what we prepared to show, but happy to answer any additional questions or provide context on anything that we've talked about so far, or maybe potentially new topics. So
definitely. So open up to Q&A. Any questions here at the end for Thomas and Kevin? And feel free. This is your chance to ask direct to the Maxio source any questions here about Maxio. And while we wait, guys, I'm curious, I assume you handle a lot of, or handle usage-based stuff. And you mentioned the whole billing in arrears and all that stuff. So I'm curious, what kind of process do you usually see for close, when people are trying to set up usage-based billing in Maxio?
Yeah, and I might just add, there are so many different ways to bill usage that there are maybe a same amount of ways to do the rev rec on it. So, there's prepaid scenarios, there's wallet scenarios, there's real-time usage, there's backdated usage, there's manual usage. feel like I'm kind of like maybe rambling or dodging the question, but yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on if you're open to backdating it into the previous period or if you want to catch it up in the current period. And I'll kick it over to Thomas too if he has any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, Kevin hit on it. I mean, however, there's obviously some nuance there, and obviously there's implications around when you close your books and what that might look like. So we see lots of different scenarios, but we're going to make it easy for you to be able to see what's happening on the billing level and how that's exposed in the revenue, in the metrics. So yeah, I guess it's hard to say without a specific example, but yes, we're giving you the transparency that you need from a reporting perspective to expose all that and provide you with everything you need there. So,
and the other thing I might just add there is that like with SaaS metrics, the wild west of SaaS metrics, like there isn't a body of individuals that are like necessarily telling you exactly how you need to do it. But you know, in the audit, it's a different world. It's you're really contingent upon what they tell you need to do. So we try to just do whatever you're told that you need to do. So just a thought.
Yeah, I know we could go everywhere on that, but it's like, yeah, just make sure keep subscription separate usage. Like just the revenue setup so important. And we got a couple of questions rolling in here at the end here.
Yeah.
So Nick asked, how do you handle sales tax and VAT on billing?
Yeah,
take it away, Thomas.
Yeah, great question. So we do have a really great partnership and integration with Avalara Avatax. And so typically what we find is that's the best way to approach it, is that you would get a subscription with Avalara, and then basically as soon as you create or send or sync that bill down to your GL, we're automatically we're sending an API call to Avalara. They're calculating the tax and returning it so that the appropriate tax is being shown on your Maxio invoice to your end customer. So that's by and large the main way that we see it done, and it's very slick. It's really easy to set up. It's really a win for everyone involved. And then another way that we see outside of that is if you do use a connected general ledger like NetSuite, Xero, or QuickBooks, you could use their native sales tax functionality or some other type of third party that's hooked up to your GL. And we would just make sure that we're syncing the invoice down to the GL before it's actually invoiced. And that would allow us to pull the sales tax or VAT tax, GST, whatever it may be, back from the general ledger. So a couple of different ways. Typically, Avalara is the preferred way to do it because it's kind of more automated, right? Your billing system, Maxio, is connected to your tax system, and it's just quick and easy. And then, of course, you can leverage Avalara for filings and simplicity around how to handle things on that side of the house.
Perfect. And then, a couple of questions rolling in, and I'll let you guys read the question from Tracy in the Q&A. And really kind of looking at a holistic, I'm guessing, Tracy, a holistic view of customer revenue, of kind of maybe you're invoicing here, invoicing somewhere else is my question, because that does come up. Like I've been in due diligence where they want to know like revenue, total customer revenue, regardless of the revenue stream. So I'm curious on your thoughts there, guys.
Yeah, I'll kind of start with a cursory answer to both of those questions, and then I'll kick it over to Thomas, who might know a little deeper. But on the hardware side of things, we do often see quantity used as a way to quantify the number of like units sold for each line item. And then the other thing I would say is that there's this concept of a contract in Maxio and as well as the customer, where you can report revenue by the customer or by the contract, kind of zero in on sort of one sliver of revenue that isn't just product focused. So I don't know if that does a good job at answering that initial question, Tracy, but Thomas, feel free to bridge on.
I mean, as far as generally speaking, we do see that the software and the hardware are kind of built together and both represented in Maxio. Generally, I don't know if that, I think you kind of alluded to like maybe they're being separate, but actually, especially if you want some consistency on the end customer's end, where on the end customer's side, where you want to send them a bill for the subscription and the hardware, and that they're not receiving two different invoices from two different places. Just from an operational perspective, we generally would recommend just using Maxio for both, and then that would of course allow you to do the reporting for both as well, because we do have really phenomenal, obviously, in all the financial reporting that you just showed, but there's no reason why you also couldn't leverage the SaaS metrics, potentially even for some. I know this sounds interesting, but for even reporting on some of those hardware pieces where we can give you some trends and velocities on the quantities of things that you've sold, not just the MRR and ARR, but the amounts of things that you've sold and how those adjust over time, to understand how you're doing well or lack thereof in a particular area of a product line. So definitely some things to think about there.
And Tracy, Kevin's and Thomas's emails are in the chat, so maybe grab those, and maybe there's some follow-up questions. You can ping them on that, because great question. That holistic customer view, like you said, coming up in due diligence. And then I know we have a few minutes left, but Bobby has a question here, and guys, in the chat, if you want to download my templates, I put that in the chat. And also, please join my general SaaS community so you can be notified about future events here. But Bobby has a question. I noticed on the zoomed in monthly revenue for the sample customer varied by month. What is the cadence of RevRec, daily, other options? So I know there are multiple options, but tell us about that.
Yeah. And one thing we always try to say is, like, there's no best RevRec method. There's just what's the most audit friendly for you. Like, some people, they do evenly with prorated partial months, first and last. Some people bundle, the partial months into the front or the back of the RevRec schedule. Some people do daily. There's a bunch of options within Maxio, and we typically set it up as a default across your different customers, so you don't have to make the changes. And then from there, you might just change the term length. So maybe you set your implementation to just be like 1 day of revenue instead of spreading it over a certain term, but it will follow that either daily for everything or evenly for everything. That's the question.
Yeah, exactly. So, and just to nail that down, everything, I agree with everything that Kevin said. But yes, there are canned options in Maxio. There's I think 25 particular methods that you can apply that will just do it automatically for you. And we find it very rare that all of those options, actually anything really outside of 5 to 7 options, are kind of rare. But you can do whatever you want, but those options typically answer all the needs that we ever see, to handling daily down to monthly evenly and kind of everything in between with proration. So you're not going to have to do any of that manually. That's going to be out of the box. You choose an option and it's going to spread that RevRec out for you as desired,
I was just saying, I had a call this week where they were mentioning, I think we want to do it evenly each month. And we kind of realized that they were just doing it because it was easy in a spreadsheet. And they're like, oh, well, if we're moving to Maxio, we're just going to go daily if it's automatic. And so sometimes you kind of open up your options because you don't have to do it in a spreadsheet anymore.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah, lots of options. So perfect. Yeah. So almost out of time here, but if there are any last questions before we wrap, let us know. Some great questions there, so appreciate it. So again, in the chat, the emails for Thomas and Kevin are there, so copy and paste those right now, so you can ping those guys later if you have questions or follow-ups. Let me see what else. Yeah, TCV, important key metric. Yeah, TCV for Tracy. And even, when I was going through due diligence with a client, one thing they wanted to know all billings, which was interesting. So just tracking, like something that should be so simple, but just tracking all billings for the year, whether that was a 1 month invoice, 1 year, 2 year, but they just wanted to track that, versus maybe like some other things like cash adjusted EBITDA. So, so super great questions here. So appreciate it, guys. Randall, Tom, appreciate it. Grab those templates, join my SaaS community for future events and training. And grab their emails. And guys, with that, anything we want to wrap up with before we close out?
I mean, I would just say that, I think sometimes the finance side of the business is a little bit underappreciated. And I think this job is what kind of helped me really appreciate the finance side of the business. And I think they're also helping drive revenue a lot more, maybe than a long time ago. So we just want to help you guys get the right tools to do your job appropriately and just make your job easier. So, and we're open to any combos too that might be helpful.
Yeah, please reach out if you want to talk with us personally or to our team or see a demo. We'd be more than happy to set that up and get you the answers you need to your questions to help your business.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, appreciate the time today, guys, Thomas and Kevin. And I put their emails again right at the chat here at the end, so you can copy and paste those, grab those, put them in an email, save them. And then the replay will go out to everyone, and I'll post the replay in my No Fluff course series, so you can have access to that in my SaaS Academy. So I'll also put my email in here if there are any logistical questions on where to grab resources. So feel free to email me anytime. Always look forward to those emails. So guys, thanks. Really informative. I really enjoyed it today in the discussion. And yeah, with that, follow up with those guys if you have questions. And with that, we'll wrap. And again, thanks for your time today, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Ben.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Yeah.